Welcome back to our conversation, Tracy. I so appreciate all the discussions we've been having about how marriage is a fairy tale to begin with, embedded in our scriptures, embedded in our systems, the desire to walk up to that altar and have a great life lives within most of us, and most of us continue to pursue that dream. But the reality is it doesn't work out for very many people, and the pressures are immense. The misery is immense. The till death do us part kind of becomes death in itself for the people who are trying to live through it, or whether they are pulling away or pulling together or trying to push apart. And I think one of the things which we discussed in our last episode was the role religion plays in all of this as well. So religion itself perpetuates the myth that this is a story time of a lifetime. How can religion play a part in terms of decreasing the pressure so that the individuals involved don't have to see it as an antagonistic process if they are actually trying to pull apart?
Yeah, and as you were asking that, I was kind of delineating a bit between like the institution of religion and then what in a faith, like the messages and the teachings of a faith perspective that also offer light on this subject. But certainly I think some of the institutions or the way that certain ideas around what marriage should be has gotten kind of in a status quo-ness. And yeah, what would be interesting is how religion can kind of examine where there's been some stuckness and maybe some subservience to the status quo, and where there can be maybe more imaginative ways of supporting marriage outside of that.
Yeah, or people who are trying to get out of marriage as well.
Exactly,
Yeah. So the moral righteousness doesn't just come from the faith institution, but it is what it is embedded in people's psyche too. So it can come through your brothers, sisters, friends, father, mother, but it starts from there. It starts from most ceremonies, rituals have some sort of a faith-based tradition in there as well. So people who are trying to get out of it sometimes feel they're doing something morally wrong as well.
Yes, absolutely. I think that element of self-righteousness is threaded throughout. And it's interesting because I think if you really look at a lot of the teachings, or at least the nuggets, the gems, the kernels of faith traditions, they don't come from a place of self-righteousness. They come from a place of desiring justice or connection and promoting, yeah, exactly, compassion. I love that. Yeah. So it's actually, I think, how we've organized around it and organized around a kind of status quo-ness to, keep a kind of stability, which again, there's nothing wrong with the security and stability, but when it kind of turns in on itself as a way to be a system of control versus a system of, promoting some of that life-giving nature that relationships really are about, then I think that's a problem.
Yeah. I've been listening to this audio book, Nexus, and it talks a lot about how the religious text and the religious books are seen as this infallible truth. And most other sort of documentation of systems has some sort of a self-correcting procedure. You go in and you amend or you update, and there's a latest version of something. But with faith, it's almost as if somebody at some point in time told the eternal truth, and that eternal truth cannot be deviated from. And in the context of marriage divorce, again, is it time? And I know that, there's schools of thought which say that, humans are so independent and so selfish that they can distort everything. So that is the other extreme of seeing that if you just interpret everything in an individualistic way, you're going to destroy everything which is off order or which maintains order in some way. And marriages maintain some sort of an order here. But is there something which needs to be a deeper, like is it the start, is the modern context the start of something, a deeper reflection on whether this is the truth of today?
Yeah, no, I love these questions and reflections. And yeah, I think, power and privilege really comes into this, because who is this serving? Who like this kind of figuration of relationship, of staying in relationships, like who does it serve? And I think that's just a really big question around our institutions and our religions. But yeah, and then upsetting that is obviously problematic, and you're shunned and no longer is a part of like the community in some ways if you go against that. But I like that question of like, why is it about our religious texts or faith traditions, or how interpretations of texts have come into being, have stayed so static and status quo? And I think it serves the powerful.
Yeah, the powerful in the religious institutions.
Well, I think it like, I guess religion and culture like kind of weave in with one another. And I think in Canada, the States for sure, we see that kind of that weaving of civil religion, like what is state, what is religion? And I think everything kind of bleeds into one another and they're feeding into that. I mean, certainly we see where more on the right, there is like messaging that really is aligned with what a certain type of family should look like and the rights of people involved in a family dynamic.
And I mean, our intent of our conversations is not about, oh, how do we arrive at disruption in a way where everything which is kind of maintaining these structures is destroyed. I think the intent is to see that this whole concept where this fairy tale was meant to bring joy and happiness in the lives of the people involved. And we certainly continue to hope that it does produce that for lots of people. But for the ones where it doesn't work out, how do you take the pressure off? And how do you also make them not, obviously people who've had a relationship have a lot of history, a lot of attachments, a lot of common goals they have achieved together. How do you move them forward so that they can move forward without shame and also salvage some of their respect for each other or the relationship that they have had over the years?
Yeah, given the systems and I guess the general messages of society, or depending on your communities, like if it is veering towards a preference for staying in relationship, it can be really hard to leave. Like, I don't know if you can come through it without an immense amount of discomfort, or at least a degree of discomfort or pain and the grief of that. But what I think is important then is like, how are you resourcing yourself? And I think more and more there are communities of support for people who are wanting to, choose a different path. Certainly, obviously as a therapist, I think there can be value in finding someone to companion you in something like that, like leaving a relationship. That said, that a therapy might not be your way. There are many ways to resource yourself and get support. But I think it is important to be asking yourself that question, because if the shame does come from others, or the tensions arise around, around your decision, then it's going to require like a lot of support.
Yeah, so people aren't losing just their spouse, or they're losing family attachments, on either side of the family, children's association in many instances, depending on how old the children are. The social networks who can judge you in a very big way. So, I mean, how do you, like, I understand what you're talking about is the communities of support, but how do you create a system where people are not, that a disruption to a relationship between two people does not mean a disruption to everything else? Like, are we creating separate lives and separate orbits completely because two people couldn't get along?
Well, I think we're living in a time where, it's starting to change, but there are still very much well-worn grooves in how we conceptualize a breakup, or how it's perceived. And so I don't know if I guess I'm hesitating on saying like it can be comfortable. On the other hand, it may be one's liberation and the best thing. Like, I think everyone's story is so different around this, but I hear what you're saying. Like, how do we change, like how
the perception?
The perception. And I think we're in that time and space. And certainly we know, like, I mean, it is happening. Like people don't stay in relationships forever. I think, yeah, I guess
we're talking about how can we ease the pain.
yeah, well, I think that's where it's like, who are your people? Like, who are your circles of support? Who can you go to who aren't going to, come with that self-righteous angle, and are going to be your compassionate companion and friend?
So it can't be just completely without pain, but it can be bearable pain, I guess.
I think there's always going to be things you lose with the decisions, and things you gain. And I think it's like you kind of got to weigh, like, what can you let go of and what can you enter into or walk into. And there is going to be some grieving involved with that. That said, depending on one situation, it may be like it's just absolute liberation. I mean, I remember getting on one of my relationships and all I felt was euphoria for like ages too.
How long did it last?
Yeah, it was a good decision. Yeah. I felt very good about it. But I know that's not for everyone. And that came with I didn't have children. I didn't have perhaps some of the cost involved, and it was also a relationship I really needed to leave. But
yeah, and I'm enlightening it up. I think there was an Indian show, and I think it was a Netflix series, which was it was called Decoupled, and it was about a couple amicably deciding, that it wasn't working out for them, and actually planning their whole decoupling, and then actually having a celebration when they finally do kind of call it off. I guess that's a scenario which probably would work out for people if again others weren't there. I guess there's different orbits who judge these things differently, and how do you kind of bring it to some sort of a common denominator of it's okay, make things work as much as possible, but if you can't, it's okay.
Yeah, no, I love that, because I think ritual is important, where marking the end, again, we can look at a relationship as ending and it being a failure, but maybe it was really successful 25-year marriage, and you brought in amazing humans into the world, whatever it is, how can you really celebrate exactly. And I think we need more rituals for these transition periods and times in life, because I think we can imagine things differently in that way, or in new ways, to provide us with walking through these big thresholds.
Yeah, so more rituals to celebrate when you culminate something which has been beautiful but is no longer serving the purpose or serving you, and not to feel diminished by any of that. You said the term liberation. So let people find that freedom, fulfillment, liberation, whether they're in a relationship or getting out of it, and let them celebrate everything that they have done to make it work, and the good times they've had with a partner.
Yeah, I mean, as you're saying that, it makes me think how our institutions, or how if people are dropping out of marriage or choosing not to be in a marriage, then I think we need to ask ourselves, what is it with the way things have been designed? Because it can make it look like it's about the people, but actually I think there's something about the way it's designed that we really need to question and examine.
Yeah, so I think the design, I agree with you, needs to be examined. And with that, we're gonna call our series to an end here, and hopefully we will chat about other things. Tracy, good luck to you in your practice and in all your ventures. And to our viewers, thanks for being with us in this conversation. We certainly enjoyed it. These aren't easy topics, and as I have mentioned many times before, if you are in need of help, please do not hesitate to seek that help. I think it's the beginning of a bigger conversation, even though ours is ending. Thank you for being with us.